Selections are one of the most powerful tools in Photoshop, and in this three-part series, we're going to teach you everything you need to know. We're going over simple selection tools. Now, don't let these fool you. There's a lot you can do with these tools. And in this example, we're going to be cutting out mountains and adding a new sky into our image. Let's go ahead and jump in and get started. So here we are in Photoshop. Now you guys can download these sample images on PHLEARN for free. Just follow the link right down below. So I'm gonna go ahead and start by grabbing my move tool right up here at the top left, and we're gonna click and drag from one image to another. That's just gonna copy that from one image over here to the other. You can see it's way too big. I'm gonna hit Control-Command-T, and we're just gonna scale that down a little bit. There we go, something like that looks pretty good. Now I want these clouds to look like they're behind the mountains, so I need to cut those mountains out. Let's go ahead and hit F for full screen. I'm gonna make that sky invisible for now, and we need a great way to cut these mountains out. But this is an intro to selection. So we're gonna start off by just generally explaining what selections do and going over some simple selection tools. Let's go ahead and create a new layer. I'm gonna do that just by clicking right here on the new layer icon on the bottom right of our layer panel. There we go. Now I'm gonna grab my first simple selection tool. This is the Marquee tool. Clicking and dragging or clicking and holding on that will bring up a rectangular, elliptical, and then you have a single row or a single column. I don't really use these two on the bottom very much. We just want to focus on these two on the top. So the rectangular and the elliptical. Let's go ahead and grab that rectangular marquee. I can click and drag, and you can see now I have a selection active. When you have a selection active, that basically means you can only edit the areas within that selection. So let's go ahead and grab the brush tool. I'm going to hit B for the brush tool. Let's go ahead and sample this color. I'm going to hold Alt or Option and sample this blue color. And then I'm going to start painting on my image. And you can see no matter where I paint, it's only going to show up in that area. So this is fundamentally what selections are for, only affecting a certain area of your image. Now let's go ahead and show you how to manipulate and add and subtract and use these selections to a little bit greater degree. So let's go ahead, I'm just gonna deselect by hitting Control or Command D, or you can just go up here to Select menu and go down to Deselect. There we go. Now that we don't have a selection, check this out. I can just paint wherever I want. So if you want to restrict the area that you're editing to a certain area, use a selection. All right, let's go ahead and hit Undo. I'm just gonna go ahead and clear that area. And now let's go over some of the tools within our rectangular and the elliptical marquee tool, showing you how to add, subtract, and invert your selections. So with the rectangular marquee tool, I can simply click and drag and create a rectangle. Now, if I want to create a square, I'm going to hold Shift. So Shift, click and drag, that's going to make a square. Now, oftentimes when you're creating a selection, you don't exactly know where to start it, right? Like let's say I wanted to make a square selection right around these mountains. Maybe I didn't start off in the right place. While you're making your selection, go ahead and hold down spacebar and you can move your selection while it's being created. So with spacebar, and then I can let go of spacebar, go ahead and create the selection that I want, and we're good to go. Now, for instance, if I were to click on my background layer and hit Control or Command J, what that would do is it would take that area within that selection and copy it. So by that selection, we're able to copy that to a new area. Again, Control or Command J is the keyboard shortcut for that. Let's hit Undo a couple times. We're back to our selection. Now let's say we want to add to this selection. Well, I'm still going to use my rectangular marquee tool. There we go. I'm going to hold the Shift key now, and you can see my little cursor has a plus icon next to it. That's going to allow me to add to this selection. So if I hold Shift, there we go, click and drag, now I've selected multiple rectangles and they've added them together. You can also use these icons right up here at the top to add, subtract, intersect. Okay. If you want to hold Alt or Option, you can subtract from your selection. So if I hold Alt or Option, click and drag, this is going to subtract from my selection. Let's go ahead and do that again. Now, this is a cool one. If you hold Shift and Alt or Option, you'll get this little X. That will actually create the intersection between two selections. So if I select there, intersection. So Shift is going to add to a selection, as you can see. Alt or Option is going to minus out from any selection. And Shift and Alt or Option is going to create the intersection between two areas that you've selected. Now you can do this with any selection tool. So let's go ahead and start with a regular selection here with my marquee. I'm going to go ahead and click here on my marquee selection tools. We're going to go to the next tool, the elliptical marquee tool. basically does the same thing. Instead of a rectangle, it's going to be an ellipse. If you want to create a circle, just hold down Shift. There we go. So as I create this, we're going to hold Shift and I can actually add it to the rectangle that I had before. Alt or Option, I can click and hold this down. If I hold Shift as well while I'm doing this, it's going to constrain it to a circle and I can minus that out. There we go. So you can see as we move along, don't forget you can always hold spacebar to move around. If you're like got a really beautiful part of your image that you like, click on your background, Control or Command J, and then I could move that around, copy it to another layer, or let's say I could create a solid color fill layer behind it. There we go. I have a nice little vignette of an image. So as you can see, selections basically allow you to edit certain areas of your photos. We've gone over the rectangular marquee tool, the elliptical marquee tool. Now let's go ahead and start getting a little more practical. We've done a couple examples with like duplicating the background mountains, and we've shown you how to draw in just a certain area of your photo. But in a more practical sense, selections are used primarily to do things like cut objects out of their backgrounds. So let's go ahead and start showing you how to do that. Now I'm here on my background layer once again. Let's go ahead and clean things up. If you remember, we brought in our sky at the beginning of this episode. I'm on my background layer, and what I want to do is start cutting out my mountains. So let's go ahead and start. We're going to use a few different tools to do this. I'm going to start with my rectangular marquee tool. So let's go ahead and make a rectangle selection. I don't want the sky to be visible, right? So let's go ahead and say, I want to cut out this sky using my rectangular marquee tool. And as you're going to see, it's not the best tool for the job because, well, the mountains aren't perfect rectangles, but that's okay. Now I've made my selection up here at the top. What I can do is click here on my layer mask icon on this layer, and that's going to load my selection into a layer mask. Now a layer mask will either hide or show certain parts of your layer. And if you have a selection active, it's going to automatically load that selection directly into the layer mask. So I have a selection active, as you can see right here. Okay, that rectangular marquee. Let's go ahead and click here on our layer mask icon. There we go. And as you can see, now the area that I had selected is visible and everywhere else is invisible. Okay, now let's take a look at the layer. So we have our layer, and then right next to it, we have a layer mask. So we can see with this layer mask that the top of it is white and the bottom of it is black. So white areas on your layer mask will be visible, black areas will be invisible. If you want to invert this, you can hit Control or Command I, and it's going to flip it around. So let's try that. Control or Command I, it's going to invert, and now our sky, part of our sky, is invisible and the mountains are visible. All right, let's go ahead and see what this is looking like. I'm going to start pulling these two together. And do we have a realistic composite just yet? Not really, because as you can see, we have a very well-defined line between the sky and the mountains. So we need to continue to work on this. All right, so we've seen the rectangular marquee tool, maybe not the best tool for the job. Okay, the next tool we're going to look at is the elliptical marquee tool. Yes, I could definitely just create a bunch of little ellipses here and then click on my layer mask and go to Edit and down to Fill, and then fill that with black. As we remember, black make things invisible on our layer mask, so hit OK. And yes, that did make those areas invisible, but this is still not the best tool for the job, as we would have to just create a bunch of ellipses. So we're going to move on to our next tool, and this is called our Lasso tool. Now the Lasso tool will actually allow you to draw selections on your images. So let's go right over here. This looks like a lasso, like howdy cowboy. We have three different lasso tools. There's the regular lasso, the polygonal lasso, and the magnetic lasso. We're going to go over all three of those right now. So the regular lasso tool, let's go ahead and zoom into our image. This literally allows you to click and draw where you might want a selection to be active. And this is actually a fantastic tool to use for these mountains because I can just draw right along the edge. All right, let's hold spacebar down so I can move around my image. Let's go up around here and over around to the corner there. I have a selection. I know I didn't do the whole mountains because I want to show you multiple tools, but I've done a pretty nice selection there in the mountains. We're going to go to Edit and then down to Fill, and we're going to fill this with black. Again, we're filling it with black because I want to make my layer mask black in that area, which is going to make the layer invisible. So with layer masks, white is visible and black is invisible. So I've selected an area, I want to fill it with black, it's going to make it invisible, revealing the sky that's underneath it. Let's hit OK. There we go. And we can see, all right, off to a cool start. If I continue to do that along the entire mountain range, we actually might be able to cut these mountains out in a pretty believable way. So that tool might not be that bad. The lasso tool might take a little bit of time, but we could definitely cut out these mountains. Now, what happens if you have something that's a little bit more straight edge? Because the one downside with the lasso tool is that, like, as you're creating a selection, if you move, let's say you're using a mouse or a cursor or a tablet, as you move, like the natural variations that your finger or your hand might make, it doesn't look very accurate. It's kind of like jagged. And in the case of this mountains, that's not that bad of a thing really, because mountains kind of have a jagged edge. But let's say you wanted your edge to be a little bit straighter, okay? Like if you're cutting out a building or a piece of architecture, right? Then you would want to use the next tool located directly under the lasso tool. This is called the polygonal lasso tool. So L is your keyboard shortcut for the lasso tool, and you can hit Shift L to switch through all your lasso tools. There we go. So let's try this polygonal lasso tool. In this case, you click, and then you have this little line. You can click again, and I have a little line again, and each time I click, it connects those two lines. So you can see this tool works a little bit better. It doesn't have that natural variation built in, but if you're cutting out something that has well-defined edges that need to be straight edges, this is a fantastic tool for the job. I'm gonna hit Control or Command minus a couple times to zoom out. Spacebar allows me to kind of move around my image. And then let's go right up here to the very top. And I'm just gonna hit Enter, and that's gonna close that selection down. So you're gonna be making a selection as long as you click and drag, but once you hit Enter, you have your selection active. So my selection's active, looking pretty good. Let's try it again. I'm on my layer mask. We can see I have my layer and my layer mask. By the way, if I hold Alt or Option and click on my layer mask, this is what my layer mask looks like. Okay, we're a work in progress. So let's go ahead and click on the layer mask. You can see I have these white lines right around the mask. That means the mask is selected. So now again, I want to fill this with black. Let's go to Edit. We're going to go down to Fill, and we're going to go down here to black. There we go. Now I have a couple really cool shortcuts that I want to show you. I'm with my regular polygonal lasso tool right now. So I'm clicking and it's going to create straight lines. But if while I'm using this tool, I hold Alt or Option, check this out. It turns into the regular lasso tool. If I let go of Alt or Option, there we go. I'm back to my polygonal lasso tool. There we go. So if you wanted to create some straight lines and then some curvy sections, just hold Alt or Option and it's going to switch from the polygonal to the regular lasso tool. It works the other way around with the regular lasso tool too. So let's go ahead and grab our regular lasso tool, which allows you to make curvy selections. I'm going to hold Alt or Option. There we go. And now I'm using my polygonal lasso tool. There we go. Let go of Alt or Option, and I'm back to squiggles again. This allows you to make very quick, great selections over complicated backgrounds. Now, the next selection tool we have is right under that, and this is called the magnetic lasso tool. Now, the magnetic lasso tool is actually incredibly cool because if you click on an area, it's going to try to automatically find the edge of wherever you're going. Okay, I'm not clicking here. The tool is actually doing its best to find the edges and stick to them. Now, if it creates some points that you don't like you get stuck with this, hit the delete or backspace key, and it's going to simply delete some of your points and move backwards in time. And say you can come down here and get a little bit closer. I don't tend to use this tool that much. It tends to be not like the most accurate, but it can be really helpful, especially if you're new to selections and you don't need a super accurate selection. There we go. Hit Enter to close that out. It can work quite well. So let's go ahead and go to Edit and down to Fill, and we're going to fill this with black. So you can see we're kind of inching our way along, revealing the sky in the background. All right. Now, you might be asking yourself, these tools are pretty cool, but is there a faster way to do this, right? Like, the sky is relatively simple in this image. Can we make this selection a little bit faster? So the answer is yes. There are a lot of ways to do that. We're moving on to our next tool, which is going to be our magic wand tool. That's nested with a few different tools. So let's go ahead and click right next to it. So we've got on Marquee, we've gone over the lasso tools. Now we're going to go over the magic wand tool, and we're going to go over the quick selection tool. The object selection tool just got a recent advance with AI, and we're going to be going over that in our next episode because it's a little bit more advanced now. So let's go ahead and try our magic wand tool. Now, up here at the top, you're going to see a lot of different options for all of our tools. We have some options to where it's going to sample For instance, a point sample will just sample the current, like the exact place that you click, or we could do like a 3x3 or a 5x5 average, which will include a little bit more information. So let's go ahead and do a 5x5 average. Usually I leave it right there. Now, the next tool we have right next to it is called tolerance. This controls how much it's going to select close to where you actually click. Let's go ahead and keep this down really low for now. We're just gonna click on 10. Now, let's say I just click right here on the top of this mountain. What it's going to do is it's going to select everywhere that's relatively similar to where I click. Okay, I'll click here in the shadows. It's going to click relatively similar areas. You can see in this case, it's selected quite a bit because that was similar to wherever I clicked. So in this case, clicking up in these areas, it's selecting relatively similar areas, but down here, it kind of selected a little bit more because more was similar. And it's going to go until it finds a boundary and then stop. Now, if you wanted to select more, let's hit Control-Command-D to deselect. Again, click here, it only selects that much. If I bring my tolerance up, let's try 30, and I click about in the same place, you're gonna see it selects quite a bit more. If I drag my tolerance up to 50, Control-Command-D to deselect, and click here again, it's gonna select even more. So if you find you need to select more or less, change your tolerance to do that. Now, there's also a really cool option right here that says contiguous. Now, this is going to be checked by default, meaning it's going to go until it finds a pixel that looks super different and then stop. If you uncheck contiguous, let's go ahead and click here now, it's going to look everywhere in your image that's relatively similar. See, it found these mountains over here and found these mountains over here with a similar color range, and it selected those as well. Okay, now let's go ahead and zoom out. If I check contiguous back on and click right here, you're going to see it's going to stop right there, not select anything else. If I uncheck contiguous and then go ahead and click here, there we go. It's going to select everything that's relatively similar. And of course, you can sample all layers here as well. If you have a very complicated image, that might be helpful. I'm going to just leave contiguous on for now. Now, in this case, we're looking really good. We found that the magic wand tool can basically select areas that are similar to wherever we clicked. Now, the sky in this original image was relatively plain. It was relatively similar pretty much all around. So let's go ahead and reveal our sky to see about making that a selection. Let's start by holding Shift and clicking on the layer mask for this layer. It completely reveals the sky, and now you can see, yeah, we should be able to make a selection of this entire sky pretty quickly because it all pretty much looks the same already. So let's go ahead and start this off. I'm going to just keep all of these settings. Our sample size is going to be a 5x5 average. We're going to set our tolerance to 50, and then we're going to have contiguous checked. So I'm going to go ahead and just click right here at the top and see like, okay, cool. Yes, it selected the sky, but it selected too much. So we're going to bring our tolerance down so it selects less. So let's go ahead and try our tolerance. We're going to go down to 20, Control-Command-D to deselect, and then click again. And you can see, much better. We've selected the sky, okay, all the way up to the edge of the mountains. I'm going to hold Shift, just like we learned earlier. Shift will add to the selection. There we go. Let's go ahead and click there. Click up there in the corner. It's still adding kind of like a little bit too much. You can see it's starting to select down there in the mountains. Now, I can lower the tolerance. Let's try maybe 15. Deselect by hitting Control-Command-D. And we're just going to continue to Shift, click, and add to the selections. There we go. And we're looking pretty good. Now, in this case, you're going to see, maybe it didn't do the best job. So we have a few different options we can choose. We can lower our tolerance again, if we want to do that, and you can do that on the fly. I can hit Control-Command-Z a couple times. I can type in a tolerance of 10 and then Shift click here. There we go. It seems like it's doing much better. Or I can just load up different selection tools. And that's the beauty with selections in Photoshop, is you can use any selection tool at any time. So we're going to take a look at this and we're like, okay, cool, pretty good. Like, we don't have the top right selected perfectly and these mountains don't look perfect, but I know how to fix these now. Let's go ahead and grab one of our other tools, the Lasso tool, and simply add or subtract to this selection. So here we are. Our Lasso tool is going to allow me to just draw my selection in. Now, I want to minus this area of the mountains from my selection, right? Because I don't want it selected. Really, I just want the sky selected. So we're going to hold Alt or Option and then click and drag over this area here. There we go. Let go, and then minus that area out of the selection. Now, let's say maybe I don't want those background mountains selected, just these foreground mountains. We're going to hold Shift, and I'm going to be able to simply add to this selection by drawing up at the top. So I can use any selection tool at any time to add, subtract, or intersect from my selections. There we go. And that's looking pretty good. All right, let's hold Shift, and I added to that selection. I meant to minus out, so hold Alt or Option right there. Now up here at the very top right, maybe I want to use my Marquee tool. So let's go ahead back over here to our Marquee tool. We're going to go to our rectangular marquee. There we go. I'm going to hold Shift. That's going to add to my selection, and click and drag here, and there we go. All right, down here at the bottom again, I might want to go to my Lasso tool, hold Shift, and just kind of straighten that out a little bit. Perfect. So as we can see here, we're looking pretty good. Hold Shift, add to that selection with the Lasso tool up there. All right, now remember earlier, we already created a layer mask. I disabled the layer mask temporarily. That's why it has this red X by holding Shift and clicking on that layer mask. I can re-enable the layer mask by holding Shift and clicking on the layer mask again. So let's do that. Shift, click on the layer mask. It now re-enables the layer mask, okay? We can see I've already cut out a decent bit of the sky, but now I have a great selection so I can continue my cutout. So all we have to do, we're clicked on the layer mask. Again, make sure that this little white boundary is on your layer mask, okay? If you click on your layer, the white boundary is gonna be on your layer. If you click on your mask, the white boundary will be on your mask. That allows you to edit the mask itself. So all we have to do now is fill this with black. So we're gonna go to Edit and down to Fill, and we're gonna choose to fill it with black. Hit OK, and there we go. Control or Command D to deselect, and check that out. Now we have our background. I can move this up and down and find where it looks pretty good. Well, I think we're off to a great start. And these are our simple selection tools within Photoshop. Let's go ahead and zoom in. We're going to tackle one more little thing that we just want to edit a little bit. As you can see, the edge here just looks a little bit jagged, right? What happens if you want to smooth out your edge just a little bit and maybe shrink it a little bit? Well, let's go ahead and find our place that doesn't look that great right over here. We're going to click on our layer mask. Most of the time, after making selections, you'll want to refine the edge of them, just really nice and subtly. So click on that layer mask. We're going to go to Select, and then down here to Select and Mask. This is going to make that edge just a little bit better. So Select and Mask, there we go. Now here in my global refinements, here on the very right-hand side, you have different options for your view right here. I want to go ahead and click on Layers. That's going to show me what it actually looks like on my image. So on Layers, and then I can do some things like adding feathering to the edge of my selection. There we go. I can shift my edge in or out, and I can add some contrast back as well. So I would just want to find something that kind of looks like the background. Again, with too much contrast, it tends to look a little bit fake, but there we go. We can see just a little bit of work here, and we're starting to get a much cleaner edge. So let's go ahead and click on this Show Original. Doesn't really look that great, as you can see. There we go. That's after a very quick select and mask. Hit OK, and we are good to go. So we just did a sky replacement using simple selection tools in Photoshop. And there we go. We did a sky replacement using simple selection tools in Photoshop. Thanks so much for watching. In our next video in this series, we're going over more advanced selection tools, including how to use AI and automatically cutting out your subject. It's going to be incredibly cool. Click on that subscribe button, click on that bell notification if you want to get more free Photoshop tutorials every single week. Thanks again, and I'll learn you later. Bye everyone.